Okay, welcome to Detroit in Black and White. We've got a big show tonight. It's Friday evening in Detroit. The Pistons are leading in the playoffs 2-0. The Tigers are chaotic, but
I was thinking up the American League East. They're going to do a Red Wing dive. You might as well don't waste your money to go see them.
So we've got Adolph Mongo, the main dude here, and then we've got a special guest tonight, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, a Democrat who is running in the primary, and it's been a pretty lively race so far. Everybody's kind of going at each other. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you both. Thanks for having me.
I'll start out with a question, and then we'll go over to Adolph. What's the pressing issues? It seems obvious, but what do you think those are?
I think the big picture is we have Donald Trump in the White House, who is tearing down every institution to its stud. And I had Senator Chris Murphy in town with me last week, who talked about the moment that we're in. You know, this is the 250th anniversary of our country, and we have a lot of people ready to give up on democracy itself. So the big issue is we need a democracy worth fighting for. So if we're going to build back these institutions, we're going to fight back against the Trump administration. It's not just enough to be anti-Donald Trump. I certainly have no kind words for how he's been treating this presidency, but we need to make sure that people have access to the American dream. You work hard, you play by the rules, you should be able to afford a house, you should be able to afford to start a family. That's how you build a democracy that is worth fighting for, and we prevent somebody like Donald Trump from ever coming back into the White House.
You know,
we see the Republicans' game plan is to get rid of every Democratic congressional seat that they can. Should we do that in Michigan? Redistrict?
I mean, we fought tooth and nail to get fair redistricting, and even that is a work in progress, right? I helped flip control of the state Senate to Democrats for the first time since 1984. We are not in a position like some of these other states where the Democrats would control the redistricting process. I have been pleased to see that states are fighting fire with fire, California, Virginia, but Virginia's Supreme Court just struck down that effort. Donald Trump doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about the Voting Rights Act. He doesn't care about the rule of law. He cares about power. And we have to take very seriously, he took out his vengeance on 5 Republicans in Indiana who dared to stand up against him to uphold what's right. And he was successful in taking them all out. So I hope that Democrats get aggressive and use every tool at their disposal, at our disposal, to get out of this mess so we have a country moving forward. Because right now it's drifting in a way where Republicans are changing the rules so they can win, locking Democrats out of power forever.
We've got a pretty lively race. Everybody's sort of going at each other, accusing each other. You know, El Said accuses Haley Stevens of being in the pocket of AIPAC. Said has accused you of copying some of his proposals. It's gone back and forth. Why should you get the seat? What makes you uniquely qualified of the 3?
Yeah, this is a job interview, and it is about nominating the right person to meet this moment and to do the job in this moment. And of the field, I am the only candidate who beat a Republican incumbent to get into office. I defeated Marty Nolenberg in my first run for state Senate back in 2018. We swung a district 20 points in a single cycle. I then helped flip control of the entire state Senate for the first time since 1984. And as majority whip, I help hold the Democratic Party together and deliver on everything from expanding civil rights to voting rights to affordability, bringing funding back into the communities that I represent, particularly those that haven't received funding in the past. This is not just about rhetoric. It's about knowing how to fight MAGA Republicans and win, but also knowing how to get in and work a legislative body so that you can deliver. And I'm the only candidate who's got that track record.
What about data centers? That's sort of become a controversy. A lot of people don't really follow it closely, but some people have very strong opinions about it. What's your feeling about data centers?
Yeah, I mean, there are billions of dollars that are being injected into building these things out, and it can go very wrong, or we can make sure we get it right. We should reject any data center that harms our air, harms our water, results in energy costs spiking for our residents, doesn't use union labor, and doesn't bring revenue into the state. It also can't be done in secrecy. We passed legislation on the state level that would provide a sales and use tax exemption for any company that uses at least 90% renewable energy, that uses local union labor, and that requires in law that ratepayers cannot subsidize the costs of these data centers. That's a good start. But we need to go further. I'm working on legislation now in the state and have proposed a plan as I run for Senate to make sure we have all these protections in place. And I also support an idea that Dana Nessel has thrown out there. Let's require these companies to put all the upfront capital into an escrow account so that if there's a boom bust, if they build out and then one of these companies goes away, that we are not left holding the bag and paying for infrastructure that they built out for one of these big centers that's going to sit empty.
I find it amusing that you've been criticized about not being from Michigan, and you were born in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
We done had people, senators that never lived in the state of New York get elected. We done had governors that's from Europe, California. We had a governor that was from Canada. How did that become an issue?
Let me tell you, we just had a meet and greet in Detroit at the Motor City Java House next to the Redford Theater over the weekend. And the first question was from a Detroiter, an older woman who shared with me that her biggest concern is that she raised her kids here in Detroit, that they both went to the University of Michigan, and then they left Michigan. And she said, what are we doing to bring our young people back to the state? And that is what I heard in my first election. When I knocked on doors in 2018, so many people told me, you remind me so much of my daughter who left Michigan. Why are you here? And what can we do to bring our kids back? I have had the experience of living all over the country. And what I can tell you is that there is no place as special as Michigan. Michiganders love Michigan. I started coming out on a road rally around the state years ago. The friends of mine started 1,000 miles around the state. It was a different route every year. And no matter where I was in the state, people wanted to get to know me and ask where I'm from and what do you do and how can we work together? And that was so infectious. So I chose to move to Michigan. I got engaged to my now husband here. We got married at Eastern Market. My daughter was born at Beaumont, Royal Oak, which is the same hospital where my husband was born. Michigan welcomed me with open arms. And what I hear from residents is we want more people to move back home. I don't think that it's something to run away from. I've never shied away from the fact that I chose this place. And it gives me a perspective of realizing just how special it is.
But a lot of the viewers are talking about, I don't want to get into the whole text thing because it's been sort of beat to nauseum. But
you want to read some of the questions?
Yeah, and I'll ask why a lot of people are saying, well, you said Michiganders are morons or whatever. That keeps popping up here. So what do you say about that?
I have had a social media presence for almost 20 years now. I actually started my career by winning a car design competition. I designed a concept car for a car design competition that was held in partnership with Facebook when I was still in college. And more, we have people who have had their entire lives online. I complain about the weather. I celebrate when it's a good day. I complain about moving. And I was not always the most eloquent on Twitter. I'll admit that. There's a lot of just frustrations that you express, but I hope that we live in a time where we don't have people who have manufactured their entire lives thinking that they might run for office one day. You know, that is just, it's sterile, it's fake, it's not who we are.
Do
And
you regret writing any of that in hindsight? Now that you're running, do you say, "Oh, probably shouldn't have said that," or
yeah,
what?
of course. You know, who among us has posted a rant on social media that looking back, if that were suddenly plucked out 10 years later, that we say, oh, I wish I hadn't read that,
Well,
written that.
that's
I,
why I didn't have it, because
yeah, yeah.
I said
And
I said
I'll
a
tell
lot
you,
of stuff.
I never thought I was going to run for office. It wasn't what I was planning. I was a normal person posting normal things. For every tweet they found that says something negative, there are tweets on there about the day my daughter was born and the day that I moved to Michigan and the road trips that I went on and how much I love this place. Thousands of tweets,
So,
and it's who I am.
so how you get past this? Where you got people saying, "Oh, she said," and in the future we don't need to have cars and all this other stuff, and this is what drives Michigan. Well, we all know the problems that the car industry left in Detroit, Pontiac, Lansing, and Flint. We lived and died by automobiles.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with looking at other past past us being a automobile state?
Well, and not only that, I mean, you pluck out a few words from a tweet and it completely changes the context of what it was. The full thread of what they dug up from years ago was me in conversation with Alex Roy and Jay Ramey, both of whom are auto journalists. I used to write for Road and Track, so I was also an auto journalist. And it was a thread of us bemoaning the way that tech CEOs we're talking about this future where nobody owns a car and they were trying to eliminate it. I love cars. You know, I was a car designer myself. And I think we can talk about the industry that I came out of and that I love and that I find a huge passion of, and the need for public transit and the need to get out of crushing auto insurance that is killing people. But to pluck out one sentence and say, oh my God, she doesn't believe in this, it loses the context. And that, you know, if I regret anything, it's things can be taken really easily out of context from social media.
You're in the state Senate.
Yeah.
Adolph and I are Detroit residents. For a lot of people, I mean, I happen to get Progressive. I changed from State Farm to Progressive. I saved a lot of money on my insurance, but there are people who are paying $4,000 or $5,000 a year, and if people in Southfield or even Bloomfield or Farmington had to pay that, there would be a lot more people there driving without insurance. What do we do? You're in the state legislature there. What do we do to make it fair for the Detroiters? I mean,
yeah, I can tell you. So I got elected in 2018. My first year in office was 2019. I served on the insurance and banking committee, and the first bill package that came before me was the auto no fault reform. And we got shoved, you know, an 89-page bill at 11 o'clock at night, and we had an emergency hearing the next day. Somehow it was an emergency. So I stayed up all night reading this bill, and I wrote down 39 questions because in my read of it, there was no guaranteed savings, that all it was going to do was punt the cost of your auto insurance over to your health insurance, that it wasn't eliminating redlining, it was just renaming it something else and saying it eliminated it. So I came into the committee hearing asking all of these questions, and I didn't get a satisfactory answer. The bill sponsor, I think I asked at one point, what is the average cost savings you would see? And he told me it was something like $51 a year. And I remember asking, do you think that is a significant cost savings for somebody? And his response was really flippant. It was something like, well, if you're poor, that's a lot of money. And it was so offensive. So I was one of only 4 senators who voted no on the auto no fault reform because I knew that it wasn't going to work. I just co-sponsored legislation to require all auto insurance rates be cut by 10% because it's killing people right now. And we need a stronger regulator to make sure that they're not just price gouging us out of existence on auto insurance. We need to ensure that they have to come before DIFS, the Department of Insurance and Financial Bureau, to ask for a rate case increase, just like you have to do with energy rates. Right now, that's not required in law. And we need public transit to create a real competitive marketplace. The insurers can gouge you right now because there isn't an alternative. You have to have a car to fully participate.
But you got, listen, what we call public transit, other folks in other cities laugh at us. Smart transportation. Most communities don't want to deal with it. You can see people standing waiting on a city bus in the dead of winter, and here come a smart bus, 3/4 empty, right past them. And I said, this doesn't make sense. Or we build a toy train. I call the Q line a toy train. It goes up and down, a mile or two.
Yep.
We need real transportation. Insurance, it is a joke. I lived at an address in a condo that was similar to one in Grosse Pointe, and I got my insurance, the first bill, and I was in the military, USAA. They thought I lived in Grosse Pointe Farms, and I said, "Damn, I hit the jackpot," because I said, "I can't believe I had to pay this," which I didn't. It was unbelievable. So yeah, you're right. We need to take a break, and then Alan, when we come back, why don't we ask the viewers?
We'll get some viewers in there.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in a home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
All right, we are back. Welcome back to Detroit in Black and White. Got Adolph Mongo. We have a special guest, Mallory McMorrow, state senator who is running for U.S. Senate in the Democratic primary. We are going to, some people there's a lot of questions. Some we've already addressed in the issues here, but we'll try to skip around. Okay, here's somebody. I don't know if I've heard this before, but it says, I heard you say that you would use rappers to reach out to Black voters. That's downright insulting, and I haven't heard an apology for that. Is that, tell us what that is?
Yeah, that would be wildly insulting if that was anything that I had ever said. There was a call recorded at the very beginning of my campaign with some of our staff. And one of my staffers was asked, what is our outreach strategy for Black Michiganders, for Detroiters? And there was a long answer about something that is important to me, is making sure that people who historically haven't had a seat at the table are invited in, whether that is local influencers, people who own small businesses in your community, not an influencer in the paid sense, but somebody who is well respected in a community, who may not be a political power player, and also included artists and musicians and rappers. And that clip was taken out of context and was pushed out. We're not sure by who. We think potentially by one of our opponents, to say McMorrow's strategy to reach out to Black voters is with rappers. And that was so offensive. And had that been true, you're right, wildly offensive. It's not who I am. I am somebody who had a background in design and media and advertising. There are so many people who should be involved in this process who aren't, if you're not the traditional gatekeeper in politics. And that's our strategy, is who are the people in their community who their neighbors listen to and who are doing creative things and who have good ideas, and how do we create opportunities to bring everybody in to be part of the campaign?
Here's another one. Abdul El Said deleted tweets too. Don't you think it's unfair that you're the only one being criticized for doing this, which is something totally normal?
Yeah, I do, and it's funny. This story became a CNN primetime story about old tweets. And you're right. He as well deleted a batch of old tweets. It's not like we went in and targeted a bunch of tweets. We said everything from before 2020, let's just kill it. I think it's probably good advice for everybody to clean up their social media every now and then. And it's a pretty normal thing to do.
What Donald Trump tweet any and everything, and people, well, that's Donald
He's
Trump.
tweeting at 2:00 in the morning, sitting on the toilet, and somehow we all have to deal with it.
The tweets that come out of there are, if another president were doing it, we just assume they had drinking about a half a bottle of bourbon and were continuing. I mean, it's a drunkenness of the tweets there. Here's another one, and again, I'm not that familiar with any of this, but it says giving the voting rights was just gutted. Do you regret stealing a state Senate seat from a Black state senator?
Ooh. First of all, that did not happen that way. My district in 2022, I was redistricted into a district against a colleague, and I was the only incumbent versus incumbent race. And I took very seriously the responsibility to ask for everybody's vote. Marshall Bullock was my colleague at the time, and we sat down, we got lunch together and had a very respectful conversation and made an agreement that we were both going to run and we weren't going to make it ugly. It was going to be about trying to do your best to earn votes. I love Marshall. I have a ton of respect for Marshall. But I knew, when I came into Detroit and was at people's doorsteps or in the community, I said, I'm asking for your trust, and that is a big ask, and it is on me to earn it. I'm proud of the campaign that both of us ran. It was respectful. It was above board.
It sure was.
Yeah, and I also know that in our first round of redistricting, through the redistricting process, it needed improvement. And that was true. I also support the ruling of the lawsuit that pushed for the districts to change again, because it undercounted that we would see higher turnout in certain areas in a Democratic primary. It was counting general election votes versus primary votes. So the districts have been changed again. And I hope that the process over time becomes more fair, that it takes the power out of the legislature gerrymandering for itself. But we also got to get fairness right, so that the Black community has proportional representation in the legislature. And we've just seen that gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah. Speaking of Black voters, and I was one that went to Marshall Bullock and say, you need help, so I can come there with a hammer. And he said, hey, it ain't like that. He said, we shook hands, and we're going to run a clean campaign because we both Democrats. And that's what you did. How are you going to appeal in places like Detroit, Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw, and people are going to ask you these questions?
Yeah. So, first of all, look at my track record, but also show up and ask questions. We do a ton of events. And we don't just do rallies where people come and hear from me and then they leave. We try to have really meaningful, deep conversations. We've hosted a panel with Black small business owners in Detroit to assess the challenges. And one of the things that I heard, particularly from Black small business owners, was that there are a lot of grant programs to start a business but there's not a lot of resources to stay in business. You know, everybody wants to show up for the ribbon cutting and for the photo op, but then they abandon you in the first few years when it becomes really hard. So that's already started me thinking about what types of programs can we create to ensure that our Black-owned small businesses thrive. I have now represented the most diverse district in the state for going on 4 years in the state Senate. And I have been very intentional about prioritizing the focus of my budget work to ensure that communities who have historically been underinvested in receive more investment. I've helped bring more than $20 million back to Marygrove. I've helped invest in CDFIs that support Black-owned small businesses along Livernois and along 6 Mile, supporting after-school programs like the Detroit City Lions and Detroit PAL, who I got to go to their first day of football season out on Marygrove's campus, and it was awesome to see it. So I'm really proud of my track record, but I also show up and I listen, and it's always a process. And I've been really, really pleased to see the number of people who are willing to open their door and give me a chance and ask questions.
You know, reparations has been a issue in Detroit, and one of our viewers asked, how do you feel about reparations? We got a committee, which the new mayor was part of. We haven't heard anything since she took office. So how do you feel about reparations?
Yeah, look, this country owes a huge debt to people who were stolen from their homes and shipped over to this country and turned into slaves, turned into property. We've never fully made that right. I am open to any ideas that make sure that every person in this country starts at the same starting line, whether it's investments in education, small business ownership, debt forgiveness, home ownership forgiveness. I talked to some residents who in Detroit who they had a home that was passed down to them from a relative, but because of redlining and contracts that didn't allow for their name to be put on a title, they didn't own that home. How do we make that right so that generational wealth can be transferred through home ownership? There's so many systemic things that we can do that I think can accomplish that goal.
Here's a couple of questions. Should the state pension fund invest in crypto? And the other question is, how will you protect the auto industry and labor in the Senate?
Ooh, great question. So we need to establish some real safe regulations around crypto. What I know, and I've heard from a lot of residents who have been historically underrepresented in traditional banking institutions who have put money in crypto, because when done right, it democratizes the financial institution. It gives you more ownership over to it. But it's also incredibly volatile. And we've seen people make a ton of money. We've seen people lose a ton of money. We had legislation before us in the state Senate years ago to create a state crypto commission, which on its face sounded like a great idea. But it came before my committee, and it was sponsored by Mike Shirkey, who was the Republican majority leader. And the way that he pitched it was, what if we used all of the public lands in Michigan to mine crypto? Like, I think he thought it was pickaxes and hard hats. And then he said we could eliminate all of our pension liabilities and we could eliminate property taxes. And it was just, I think, a real misunderstanding of what crypto is and does. So for me, especially if we're talking about pensions and investments, we need to make sure that it's the most stable asset possible, because you don't want to invest, especially public taxpayer funds in retirement, into something that's going to crash, because then you're left with nothing.
And what makes you different? Go ahead, Al. Go ahead, Al. I'll ask.
A question from Mr. Duckett, who says about protecting the auto industry and labor in the Senate.
Yeah. So this is a moment of pivotal change for the auto industry. I was one of the largest proponents of the EV tax credit, of investing in apprenticeship programs and workforce development to allow our industry to compete on the global market. We are at a moment right now where BYD, which is a Chinese automaker, is going to start selling EVs in Canada. That is right across the border. The Trump administration has expressed a willingness to work with Chinese automakers. China doesn't even invest, I mean, bankrolls the auto industry to intentionally challenge the market. I mean, they're selling some of these EVs for the equivalent of $11,000, $12,000, and they're really sophisticated, well-made vehicles. The loss of the EV tax credit, whether or not you like EVs, killed our ability to compete. Ford posted a $19.2 billion loss. GM posted something like a $7 billion loss, because if you think about the amount of capital required to retool the lines, the plants to build vehicles, not just to be sold in the US, but to compete in a global market, that tax credit allowed for that capital to go in. So we're on our heels right now. So for me, it's restoring that tax credit. Hopefully, eventually it goes away because the cost of the technology comes down enough where you no longer need it. But I also want to expand apprenticeship programs, workforce development programs, because what I believe is we became the home of the auto industry because we invented it, because it was designed here, it was engineered, and then all of the manufacturing grew up around it. Let's lean on that legacy to continue to invest so that the future of the auto industry, whatever it looks like, is housed here. I also helped lead the effort to become the first state in 60 years to repeal so-called right to work, talking about how do we protect labor. Right to work sounds good on its face. And what it has led to is an erosion of the power of labor and unions across the country. And I can tell you that companies will often argue they want to locate in right-to-work states. But when you actually look at the rankings of what a company considers when they locate in a state, right-to-work isn't even in the top 20. They want a talented workforce. They want people who are going to be paid enough.
In the Chinese, as far as the Chinese, I mean, people are very fearful. As you mentioned, the Chinese are making superior electric vehicles at very cheap price. Canada is letting a very limited number, and people here in the US are scared. The auto industry is really scared. Do we put big tariffs on there? What's your feeling about how do we deal with the Chinese potential to take over?
It's kind of late. I think it's too late. They're here. You know, I was in Arizona and I'm seeing a ton of driverless cars running around downtown on the highway.
Some of the Waymos that are in Detroit are Chinese made. The new little pods that they're driving around in.
So they're here. They're here.
So how do you deal with it though? And the other question I want to ask is about hybrids. I think companies like Toyota are trying to do a better balance. I think GM seems a little lost trying to figure out what to do. What's if you were to guide the auto industry at this point, what would you say?
I think for me, it is not the government's place to dictate the drivetrain of vehicles. Like, that is just not a role that government should play. We should allow the industry and consumer sentiment to dictate what the technology is, what the drivetrain is. I know Ram is rolling out kind of a new hybrid model where the gas engine recharges the battery and it kind of goes the other way around. Hybrids seem like they accomplish a lot of the needs that people have with range anxiety. And I can tell you, in my house, I drive a Chevy Bolt EV. My husband drives a pickup truck. And combined, you know, I can commute back and forth to Lansing and we can go up north if we need to, or we're not having to worry about stopping and charging with EV range anxiety. I know that as I've been talking to people from GM and from Ford and from Stellantis, they recognize they need a diverse portfolio of types of products that meet consumer demand. Some people want EVs, some people want hybrids, some people want internal combustion engines. And I think where the government has made a mistake in the past is mandating you do one thing, because you can't dictate consumer demand, but we should support making sure the industry has what they need in terms of resources and workforce to be able to create the portfolio that is going to meet that consumer demand, both within our country and internationally, because our companies sell around the world. It's a global market.
What makes you a better candidate than your other two opponents?
So I'm the only one in the race who I beat a Republican incumbent to get into office, and we can't lose sight of the fact that on the Republican side in this race, Mike Rogers is very likely the nominee. He got Trump's endorsement from day one, and the Republican super PAC, the Senate Leadership Fund, announced they're going to spend $45 million in Michigan trying to buy this seat for Mike Rogers. That is the most they've ever spent in Michigan. It's the earliest they've ever spent in Michigan, and it's more than they're going to spend in Georgia, Maine, Iowa, Alaska, and New Hampshire. So we have to treat Mike Rogers like he's an incumbent. He's going to be funded like an incumbent. He narrowly lost to Alyssa Slotkin just 2 years ago by 19,000 votes. So I'm the only one who's beaten an incumbent, the only one who helped flip control of an entire chamber for the first time in my lifetime. And in leadership in the state Senate, I help deliver on every single issue that we care about, not only as Democrats, but as Michiganders. That is a blueprint on how to fight, how to win, and how to actually build a federal government that people believe in again, because it's actually doing things that benefit people in their lives.
How do we bring the party back together? We saw in the convention, man, that was a free fall. We had one of our viewers here, Tim Geraldson, says Jordan Acker, who's on the board of at University of Michigan Board of Regents, says some awful things about people in politics, yet you support him. You know, how do we get past all this? Because we're gonna need Democrats gonna need every vote that they can get come November.
We do. Look, we got to recognize the stakes here. And what I believe is we cannot lose sight of what Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to do to this country through the Supreme Court, through the House and the Senate. And that's not to say that we just ignore the tension that exists in our party. We are a big tent party, and that leads to a lot of conflict sometimes. We got to come together and we got to listen to each other. What I took out of the convention is, yes, there was a lot of tension there, and I heard some people express a lot of concern there. I felt it, with my staff and my campaign myself, but we had a record number of delegates show up. It was more than 7,000 people. That is the highest number we've ever had. We always ask, why aren't young people showing up? College Democrats outnumbered teachers' unions at the convention. So that, to me, there are silver linings of people are engaged, and people have a right to be angry. What I hear is people saying, why can our country afford to spend so much money bombing countries overseas, but we can't afford to feed our kids? We can't afford SNAP. We can't afford Medicare. We can't afford Medicaid. We as a party, as Democrats, have to have a message and a plan and a platform that is about solving that problem. How can people afford their daily lives? How are we going to fight Republicans, and how are we going to make people's lives better? And that requires a hell of a lot of showing up and listening and being willing to bring everybody back into the party.
If you get the nomination, you're going to have to run and defend the Democratic agenda. How do you defend the governor? Did she live up to her promises of fixing the damn roads?
I mean, I can't ignore all the orange barrels that are out every single place that I go right now. We made a lot of progress. Look, I want to be very clear. Republicans controlled government in one form or another in this state my entire lifetime, 40 years. Democrats did not have a trifecta before 1984. There were massive cuts to education, to infrastructure funding before the governor took office. We spent less per capita on infrastructure than any other state in the Midwest. And building back from decades of disinvestment takes a lot of time. Now, that is not to say that we don't still have a lot of work to do. We have to improve education. We have to improve affordability and cost of living. I do think we have made a lot of progress, and we have a lot more work to do. And we have to, as Democrats, come back to people every single day, not just to say we did this one thing and now you should keep voting for us. Every day, we got to go to bat and say we are fighting for you, and we have to be able to come with receipts to show you how we've done it.
Let me ask you a hot button issue which came up during the convention and stuff is Israel.
Yep.
We've got Haley Stevens on one side, who's being supported by AIPAC, very, very pro-Israel, unquestionable. And we have on the other side, Abdul El Sayed, who's pretty anti-Israel, who doesn't want any, he has said, I don't want any money going for defensive or offensive weapons. Where do you, we have, and that seems to be a controversial issue, and particularly for progressives, it's not that popular to say I'm pro-Israel, and that means different things, or whether Israel has a right to exist, or whether we support Israel at what different levels. Where do you stand on the Israel issue?
Look, Israel does exist. I mean, to quote Ezra Klein on a podcast that I was listening to a little while ago, the question of does it have a right to is sort of the wrong question. It does. And there are millions of people who live there. There are millions of people who live in Gaza and in the West Bank. And we as the United States must be a moderating force that ends the violence, that ends the conflict, that ends the suffering, and that gets back to negotiating to a long-term two-state solution that secures self-determination, peace, and security for Palestinians with a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish democratic state of Israel. Everybody lives there. I fundamentally believe no human life is worth more than any other human life. And that we also have to separate the far-right Netanyahu government that, reporting indicates convinced Donald Trump to take the United States to war with Iran at the expense of our people. Trump came back to Congress and said, I need $1.5 trillion to execute this war that we shouldn't be in. The Ayatollah and the Iranian regime is certainly no friend to the United States. They should not have access to a nuclear weapon, but they were not an immediate threat to the United States. And we are now in this war that is costing American service members' lives, is driving gas prices through the roof, is resulting in mortgage rates going up. I mean, you name it, we are paying for it. And we have to find a way to hold the Netanyahu government accountable and not devolve into anti-Semitism. That is something that I have been watching in our state. The slide of not being able to separate how angry you are, and I am truly, about the actions of the Netanyahu government from American Jews at home. We saw this with the attack on Temple Israel in West Bloomfield. We've seen it in Ann Arbor, where there were some really ugly signs that somebody put out that didn't say holding the Netanyahu government accountable. It blamed Jews.
And what do you say to the Jewish community? There's a big Jewish community here.
Yep.
In Oakland County in particular. And then we have Dearborn, Hamtramck it's got a big Muslim population. People are asking you your policy on that.
Yep.
How do you reconcile that, the different communities who have some different views on that issue?
Yeah, and I think that's an astute point is our residents are going to have different views on the right course of action in the Middle East, and that should be expected from our population. But it is important to have an open door to everybody. And I think particularly in this primary, you have two candidates on either side of me who don't necessarily have that open door policy to everybody in the state. I made a point at the convention to talk to both the Jewish caucus and the Arab American caucus. What I know is that we have members, particularly in our Lebanese community, who are watching 1 million residents in Lebanon have been displaced. I've talked to people who their families' homes in Lebanon have been bombed multiple times, and they're wondering how we get out of this place. Being an open door and listening and saying that I believe there is broad agreement across both communities and the broader community that we just want the violence to stop. So what does the United States do to ensure that that happens, that we get out of the war with Iran, and that we bring the violence to an end in the Middle East?
Okay.
We're going to take a break and come back. We're going to read some more questions and from our state senator.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabria, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Okay. Go ahead, Al.
All right. Welcome back. We've got State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who is running for U.S. Senate in the Democratic primary. We've got some questions here. It says, and I think this may be a reference to your text. It says, I heard you took away money from autos and gave it to the bees. That must be.
No, that's ridiculous. There is a program that I helped create that I'm incredibly proud of in Michigan. That is a registered apprenticeship program that was created under the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity that allows for any company in our state to create a registered apprenticeship. So the state will put some funding in, and you can have potential employees learn on the job, just like an apprenticeship model from labor. It is predominantly used in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, in the trades, and there are a few programs in agriculture. Now, this program has put 26,000 Michiganders through an apprenticeship program. The average salary of coming out of this program is more than $80,000 a year, which is more than double the average salary of a Michigander. So I'm really proud of that program. And one of my opponents accused me of taking money away from autos, which is simply not true. But this is the program that refers to.
One of our viewers, Mr. Duckett, for 06, want to know how the Senate can help Detroit Public Schools. And that is a big question. When I moved back to Detroit in 1984, the public schools had 200,000 students. Today, I think about 40, they're lucky they got 40,000 students on any given day. How should I advocate the city should take over the school system, and I get beat up a lot. How do we fix it? Because the state controlled it at one time and bankrupted, and this board doesn't seem to have its act together. So I don't know.
Yeah, so here's what I think the federal government should do. Like I said, I represent the most diverse district in the state, Bagley through Birmingham. And I have some school districts that have the resources to have a water polo team. And that's great. Kids should have after school programs. They have beautiful buildings. They've got new technology. They've got great athletic fields. And then some of the schools in my district in Detroit, the buildings are 100 years old. They have no HVAC. They don't have new textbooks. I visited one of the schools on the day of a free dental clinic, and I was talking to one of the administrators who said, this might be the only time many of our kids see a medical professional at all this year. And that to me is unacceptable. The fact that our kids are starting at different starting lines. We have an opportunity, I believe this, with Linda McMahon, who body slammed the Department of Education out of existence. It means we get to build a new Department of Education. And I've been talking with teachers, parents, students about what the federal government could do to be helpful. And an idea that I'm considering is, what if the federal government took on the task of rebuilding all of the school buildings in our country, which would free up per pupil education funding that comes out of the school aid fund in the state, instead of going to maintaining these decrepit old buildings. Adolph, to your point, with declining enrollment, that's harder to maintain. You could put more of that money into teachers, after school programs, transportation, the things that actually help our students learn. And let's make sure that every student walks into a building that's an inspiring, exciting place to be. We wonder why kids aren't showing up to school. If it's a miserable experience, you're not going to want to go. That's been one of the coolest things about seeing the revitalization of Marygrove is there's a K-12 Detroit Public Schools campus on the campus of Marygrove. And I've heard from the parents and the students that has been life-changing, because you walk onto a college campus and you get to feel what it feels like to imagine yourself in college one day, and just being in a space that is inspiring makes you want to go up and learn.
Don't you think if you can get one school like Mary Grove or Cass Tech or Renaissance, that your district should have more schools that's on that level? What happened?
Exactly. Yes, I
What
think
happened
every
to
school should be on that level.
schools? What happened to school across the street from me, and I can walk across the street and I can get a good education? I talk to teachers who say, "Well, I wouldn't have my kid go to the school where I teach at." I say that's crazy.
It is crazy.
You won't send your kid to the school that you teaching. What does that say about the future of our public school system?
Yeah, we used to treat public education as a public good. We understood in this country that it was a benefit to all of us to have an educated population that, frankly, especially with the advent of AI coming, that kids learn to like learning because you're going to have to learn throughout your entire life. So I agree with you. Every school should be at the quality of a Cass Tech or a Renaissance or a Mary Grove or a Birmingham, a Birmingham Seam Home. All of them should be that quality. And I think that starts with the role the federal government can play is let's start with the schools themselves, the buildings, and then allow for the states to have the flexibility to rebuild educational programming in a way that best serves students.
Let me ask you, I have this is one of my personal beefs. I wonder why Michigan, unlike California, where you lived before, has a law that says that companies have to notify you before they do an automatic renewal online of whatever product is. Michigan doesn't have that, and I encounter it all the time where I forget something and suddenly I'm locked in for another year into a product. It seems like I've looked at the California law. It's probably 2 paragraphs. Why does Michigan not have a consumer protection type law like that protecting us, particularly nowadays where everything is online?
For digital subscriptions?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many subscriptions you got? 50? You don't know about?
I'm sorry.
How many subscriptions you have that you don't know about? And then it pops up on the
it creeps up on you. And you're like, holy shit, I didn't want that. I didn't want to pay 125 for that or whatever. And they give you a hard time. They're like, sorry, that's, is there anything in the works to get something like that here in Michigan?
Alan, it's a great idea. I haven't heard anybody propose that, and I'm going to go back to my legislative director after this phone call and put in a request and see if we'd have it. And if not, I will introduce it. So this is why we have these conversations.
I just think it's such an everyday problem for everybody.
Yeah, and it's so annoying. Oh my God. I get caught in that all the time. You sign up for that free trial and you forget to cancel it, and then you're stuck with it. And if you don't check your credit card bill regularly,
you're locked in for a year. I have gotten notifications right away from my credit card company that's in charge. And I reach out to the company and they're like, hey, sorry, we already did it. I did actually convince the company after I told them I was going to put online their policy, and they decided, okay, we're going to give it back.
It's a great idea. Hold me to it. Follow up with me in a week or so, and I'll follow up with you and let you know where it's at.
So as we come to a close, how should Detroiters, Michiganders, give you that vote in the Democratic primary come this August?
I appreciate, first of all, the time and the conversation and everybody's questions that I am asking for your vote in this primary so that we can go take on this fight together. I know that none of us can do it alone. Doesn't matter what title you have. But I've seen time and time again, when we organize and we come together, we use our voices. When we have conversations like this, and Alan has a great idea about consumer protection, we take it on. We know how to fight tough races. We can win. I am the only candidate with the track record of knowing how to beat entrenched Republican incumbents, build real power, and then actually have a track record of delivering. And we deserve nothing less in our next U.S. Senator. So I encourage people, get to know me. My entire agenda is on our website at McMorrowfromMichigan.com, alongside my track record on every single issue we list. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you at events. We do a statewide brewery tour. We've been doing it since the start of the campaign. We meet in coffee shops. We meet at churches. If you have a group that you want me to come out and meet, reach out to us. And I can't wait to meet you.
Okay. Well, thanks. Yep. Great. Thanks. Thanks so much for spending Friday night here. Thanks again.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right. Well, that was interesting. That was a good interview. I think I apologize to the viewers. We didn't get every question. I think we tried to get a lot of them in, but we certainly didn't get them all in. And we apologize for that. It's a juggling act here. And plus we have Teresa, who usually does the back end of the engineering, and she is out tonight. And so I'm doing that and kind of juggling everything. So we apologize for that. But any thoughts? Well,
you know what? I find it interesting because, I wrote a couple articles beating up on her. One was the redistricting, and what she said was true. People woke up one day and damn, Detroit was all the way across 8 Mile Road, down Woodward and Warren, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to change that, and then the beekeepers and some of the occupation she laid out on the table. I looked at it, and it's just another job for folks and stuff.
Right.
So, I find it funny that when you want to go after somebody, you pick a topic and you stick with it. In 1998, Feiger, who won the Democratic primary for governor, made a comment at a get-together where he was talking about, somebody asked about Elvis Presley. It had nothing to do with the campaign. He said, well, Elvis, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, Elvis Presley, it might be, they might look at him like they look at Jesus.
Right.
And man, already some black ministers in Detroit didn't like Feiger. It meant they dogged him all the way through the campaign.
Right. I wonder with Trump. I mean, Trump says so many outrageous things. I think everybody thought when they had the Billy Bush thing where he said, I grab women. When he said John McCain, I like my heroes who don't get caught. He's trashed the Pope. I think the days of one little word, like Hillary Clinton said, calling the deplorables, I think Trump has sort of desensitized people.
Yeah, he has, but he don't get the same kind of scrutiny that somebody like McMorrow. They want to go back and look at tweets 20 years ago and say, we need a smacker.
Right. I could see, whenever you move to a new place, you think I lived in Portland, Oregon. I used to work years ago at the Oregonian newspaper. And I remember going out to lunch with some fellow reporters. And as we were leaving, we had pizza for lunch. One of the reporters turned to me and said, he looked at me and said, pizza, not as good as Detroit, eh? And I looked at everything like Detroit's so much better here. And when I went to DC, the same thing. I was like, this is so much better in Detroit, and this is so much better. I think it's not unusual when you come to a new place that whatever you came from, you
stay in that place. You get used to some of the differences, because I don't live in 5 or 6 different cities, and I, even when the weather was nicer than it was in Michigan, I'm looking at Christmas Day, it's 75 degrees outside. Said, oh, I wish I had the snow. You're never satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it takes a while to get used.
But these old bones now, and this weather, man, I'm not wishing for snow.
I'm with you, man.
There's no question.
It's harder every year, it seems. So,
well, we'll be back tomorrow, Saturday.
Uh-huh.
Detroit in black and white. Jim is out in the Big Sky Country, enjoying Yellowstone Park, and we should have Vanessa back tomorrow. So,
All right. Okay. I just wanted to show a couple of those comments. All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, 10 a.m.
okay.